Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of The Walk and Talk. Today I am at StrayDog Classics, and StrayDog Classics, to give you a little rundown, it's owned by Darren here.
Hey.
Darren provides a service that restores and imports Range Rover Classics. Darren's got a couple other cool classic cars, which you'll learn more in the Car Stories episode as to why he has them. Today, I guess we'll kind of do a casual walk and talk about why he has them, and he could clue the whole world in. So, if you want to start, which car do you want to start with? Do you want to do the Rovers first?
Yeah, let's start with the Range Rover. This one over
Right.
here.
So
It
tell me
all
what's so-
started here. This is a 1995 Range Rover Classic 300 TDI four-door. Range Rover Classic had the same shape from 1970 to 1995. So this is the last year. They did it into early 96 if you want to get technical, but 1995 is really the last production year of the Classic shape. And essentially it was unchanged from 1970 to 1995. They started as a two-door version, and then in 1981 they released the four-door version, and eventually the four-door version outpaced the two-door in terms of sales, I assume due to practicality. They stopped making the two-door for most of the world in '88, but they did continue to make it specifically for the Spanish and Portugal markets until '93. So the two-doors actually are now quite rare and sought after, and the two-doors were never available in the United States. We got the US version in the States in 1987, and it was really like a souped up version with a V8 engine, all sorts of electronic doodads, power seats, power sunroof, cruise control, air suspension. A lot of these things ultimately failed in the US versions of the trucks, and the trucks were quite expensive. It was also the first luxury SUV, I believe, that ever was offered, ever. Not only in the US, but anywhere. The cars were also prone to rust. They're aluminum, so the bodies wouldn't rust, but the chassis and whatever underneath were not protected properly. So especially East Coast cars, salty roads, not good. So a lot of the US cars from 87 to 95 are not around anymore, so they become quite rare. We tend to source most of our cars in Spain, and the reason being that they were basically a simpler version of the same car. First of all, Spain is dry. The arid climate makes it so you can find rust-free examples. They also were available with 300 TDI and 200 TDI diesel engines, which are just way more reliable than the V8s that the US got. And they'll run, forever as long as you take care of them. They also have manual seats. This one has a manual transmission. Power where it counts, power steering, power windows, but everything else is very analog. There's no computers in this car anywhere, and that's ultimately what makes it super reliable. I take this car with my family, my dog, my wife, my kids on road trips, and we take it everywhere. This is my daily driver, and this is the car that I made first, and then accidentally started StrayDog Classics as a result of it. Now we do two doors, four doors. We do the US spec trucks because there's plenty of people who prefer not to drive stick. The US spec trucks end up taking more work because they have all the problems I mentioned, such as rust or the electronic issues with the seats. We do fix all that stuff, and we do it in the US, so it ends up just being a more expensive proposition. But some people, they want what they want, and we will give it to them. My personal favorite, and the car that I mostly recommend, especially for daily use, would be the 95 300 TDI soft dash. It's just the most modern and sort of refined version of the Range Rover Classic. And I joke and say that it took them 25 years, but they finally got it right in the last production year, and then stopped and switched to making the P38s.
So it's truly that different in 95s compared to like all the older models.
Yeah, so like the dashboard in the 95, I don't have another one sitting here that's a soft dash, but the dashboard inside this car is very similar to the dashboard that was used in the Discovery of the time. Mm-hmm. So all the buttons are more, they're knobs that you turn versus sliders. The radio is in a more logical, ergonomically pleasing position. On the older cars, they were down below. The dashboards aged better in these cars. But other than the dashboard and the center console, everything else is virtually the same. From the exterior to the seats inside the car for many, many years. The earliest 70s Suffolk cars and into the 80s had slightly different interiors, but especially the exterior. I mean, they really kept that same shape for 25 years, which is kind of unbelievable. Which brings me to another car that had the same shape for 20 years. I think it was 1971 to 1989. This is a Mercedes-Benz 450 SL, aka the R107. So this body shape was the same, went unchanged virtually for almost 20 years, which I just find fascinating. There's no car today that would do that. And I don't know if it speaks to the timeless design or just that it was so different from anything else on the road. The Range Rover, same thing. Can you imagine a car today that just has a 25-year, 20-year production run? And then again, for me, there's a nostalgia aspect here. My grandmother had these when I was growing up, not this exact car, but she had a silver one, and then she had a black one. And she never took the top down because she didn't want to mess up her hair, apparently. But it just reminds me of that time in my life, sitting in this car. I remember, sitting in her car as a little kid and thinking the dashboard was so high. And even as an adult driving this car, you are sort of riding low, and you have this huge hood with this huge V8 in there. And what drew me to this particular car is the color. I mean, it is just like the quintessential 70s yellow. This is a 1976 450 SL. There was a 380 SL in the US, and there was a 560 eventually later on. People will argue the merits and why one is better than the other, but the 450 is the best.
Why is that?
Well, people say the 380 was underpowered and the 560 was too powerful, almost like that the chassis and the body just couldn't handle that much power. I am not a Mercedes expert by any means, so I don't really know, but that is what I am told. And I heard the 450s are actually more rare.
Gotcha.
I actually bumped into a guy with a 450 tattoo. We were driving this in Williamsburg this weekend, and the guy was all excited. He has his 450 tattooed on his arm because his grandmother had one also. So I took some pictures. I'll give those to you.
I thought that was one of your customers or something, because I saw that. I think you posted it, right, on Instagram?
No, yeah, he was just the dude that I ran into. Yeah, I posted it on Instagram. He was just some dude in Williamsburg. And then this car actually came to me in a weird way. I was presenting my car, my Range Rover, in a car show at Lime Rock a few years ago. And a friend of mine who has a 450 SL was showing his, and he has a Euro spec car, and it's pretty cool. It has these flat headlights. And an old man carrying a flyer, an old school flyer, came up to him. He's like, "Do you want another one?" And my friend already has another one, actually. He goes, "I already have another one." But when I saw the picture of the car, this yellow car in such great condition, it turns out, these are the things people always say about cars, but it apparently was a collector's car. And the collector passed away, and his mechanic had the car and was basically, fixing it up so they could sell it for the family. So, it was sort of in the beginning of starting this business, and I was like, you know what? We should definitely buy this car. And then we redid the leather, we went through it mechanically, and I ended up selling it to a guy who ultimately bought a Range Rover from me. Yeah. And then when he came to pick up the Range Rover, I had a 1974 Jaguar in the same color as my truck, actually, a XJ12L, so it was a V12 stretched Jaguar, sedan. They made 754 of them ever, apparently. Beautiful car. This guy had a kid, and he's like, "Oh man, I need that Jaguar." And I was like, "I would love to get my Mercedes back." So we did an even trade, and I actually made a little video about that, which is in production now. So,
oh, really?
Yes.
Nice.
So we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, and this was fun. I've been driving it around. I just got the air conditioning recharged just because it's so hot that you sometimes just need air conditioning blowing on you, even with the top down, which seems very wasteful, but that's very 70s in this car. And it's the original paint, original dashboard. I mean, it really is in excellent condition. Even, I think you were here the other day when a dude just stopped by who's a Mercedes expert and was all excited about the car because he only works on these cars. And he was like, opening up the hood, and he was able to show me why he thought the paint was original. I had no idea, and it's cool to meet people who are experts in something that I admire, but I'm in no way an expert on. So it's been fun. We'll see. I would like to hang on to it for a while, but I try not to get too attached to any car except for the Range Rover that started it. That started it all.
I forgot to ask you the other day, and it just occurred to me, whatever happened to your grandma's? The last one that she had? Because I imagine
they were sold.
So
yeah.
If you look at it now from like
Yeah.
a collector's perspective,
Yeah.
one of the things with convertibles especially,
Yeah.
people love it when the convertible top is still in good shape.
Interesting.
Right? Like
Yeah.
say with the E36, for example.
Yeah.
People always want to look for a working automatic top.
Yeah.
Or a manual top
Yeah.
with clean vinyl. And
Yeah.
granted, you can reinstall a new roof, but it
This
costs money.
top is actually pristine in this car. Let's see if I can take it out in a somewhat graceful way.
Was
So it comes with a hard top as well,
Yeah, that's super cool.
and it comes with like the hard top holster. But you can see this top actually is the original top.
Wow.
I mean, if you look at it, it's
Man.
it's in pretty sweet shape. Even the clear plastic is still here. It's,
Yeah. The vinyl is very clean.
Yeah.
Careful with that. Don't crease it.
There's a little hole here, but
That's fine.
if you're driving around with the top down, and you need some quick relief,
Yeah.
you get it. I think then there's a whole procedure to lock that back in place.
Very
But,
cool.
yeah.
Do you drive it often?
I literally just did the trade a few weeks ago, so it was only I drove it this weekend really for the first time and really
Oh, sick.
drove it. And then I have to go up to the Bronx a lot because that's where our mechanics are who work on our cars. So I've been trying to take different cars there just to keep them the juices
Driven,
flowing and keep
yeah.
them driven. And it's fun. I mean, I really am a believer of driving my cars. Look, never say never, but I think it would drive me crazy to have a car that I didn't want to touch or didn't want to drive. I don't know. That drives me nuts. I get it from a collector's appreciation perspective, as an investment. But I think of cars, at least at this stage of my life, as sort of like the inevitable investment. Like it will increase in value as long as you are a good steward to it and take care of it and don't drive the shit out of it or drive it into the ground, which I take very good care of my stuff. And I'm not putting crazy mileage on these cars. But it also goes back to, I think I discussed this in the car stories, like I am a huge believer that a car does not have to be expensive to be cool. And yes, this is a Mercedes, but this is not particularly expensive, at least right now, although they have been going up quite a bit recently. So I was excited to get it back and sort of at least ride that appreciation wave for a car that I happen to love and think is cool. Anyway, if it happens to go up, great. I sort of assume the worst case scenario is I could always sell it for what I bought it for, and and at least I got to have fun with it during that time.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing about cars is the experience.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like, oh, I bought it for this and sold it for way more and I made a good flip. Like that's cool and all too. And no shades of people that are making money off of flipping cars. It's literally what many used car dealerships do, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's so much more special and I guess magical, whimsical when it comes to like old vintage cars and ones that you have more of like a story and attachment with.
I think if there's a story, and if you can improve upon them a little bit or bring something to them. For example, this car, the leather was roached in this car because it had been in the sun, so it was like crunchy. So we were able to get the leather redone in this car. We redo the leather in all of our Range Rovers and everything too. What makes this car easier to redo the leather in, and just the seats, the door cards are actually the original door cards and everything. But what makes a car like this easy to do, because there were so many of these made, there are companies that actually have the original, I guess, stitch patterns or blueprints to, you can buy the kit of the leather done in the exact right color. I thought maybe I could watch a YouTube video and somehow do it myself. I was wrong. Definitely could not do that. So we ended up getting a real upholsterer to take the new covers and put them, but it was much less expensive than, let's say, having someone cut and sew by hand, custom seats, which is what we do for the Range Rovers. No one makes covers for those, so we do custom cut and sew those, mostly in Spain. But it's just like a little thing like that, just by making the leather fresh. I think you're not hurting the value of the car. If anything, you're bringing something to it, you know. And if you're fixing some of the mechanical issues that are known, you're helping the car along. And actually, the guy that I had sold this car to, he sort of went a step further. He put a new radio in it. It's still a Blaupunk, but it's a modern Blaupunk radio. So it looks, you know, at least from here, period, correct. You know,
Yep.
you could flip down the thing and there's a USB port in there. And he put some bigger speakers in here. So he was a good steward of this car, basically, is my point. And he took very good care of it. So it was like the right, it's weird to get the same car back that you once had, although I guess people do that all the time.
Yeah.
That's my first time doing that. And then over here, we have the crown jewel. This is a car, this is a 1981 Porsche 911 Turbo, AKA the 930, AKA the Widowmaker. You know, 13-year-old me, 12-year-old me, 48-year-old me, you know, always wanted a G-body type Porsche. I never really anticipated when that would happen, how that would happen. And then just as a matter of circumstance and chance, a guy I sold a Range Rover to, he had given us a deposit and the car had come in and was ready for him to pick up, and he owed us the final payment on the car. And before he came in, he's like, hey, by the way, do you know anyone who might want my 911? And I was like, what 911? Because that could mean many things. And he sent me pictures of this car, and I was like, ugh. I was like, I have to figure it out. I ran home to my wife. I was like, Anyway, I was like, instead of you giving me money, I will give you money. And we worked out a deal so I could get this car. And this car I've done a bunch of work on as well. We changed the rims. We put a new pressure plate in. I added electric air conditioning. Someone, you know, in the history of having this car deleted the AC, deleted a bunch of things. I don't know if they were tracking it or what. They put this Protomotive Phase 1 intercooler. Like, they've done a lot of things to this car, so it's technically an outlaw, and I'm fine with that because clearly I'm not a purist, even though that Mercedes is quite pure. You know, what I do to the Range Rovers, I understand could make a purist upset, but you know, I'm trying to take these 90s cars or these 90s Range Rovers and make them look like they could have come from the 70s. And you could do that because the body style was the same. And speaking of that, this is another car where the body style was basically the same for, you know, a very long time. I think, you know, when I think of this shape of Porsche, I'm thinking like 1967 to 1997. The G-body technically started in the 70s. I'm not exactly sure when. I'm not a Porsche expert. As you can see, I'm not a Porsche guy. My wife ordered this 930 for me. If you get that joke, that you are a Porsche guy, I guess. But these were actually called Widowmakers. And there's two reasons I've heard why they were called Widowmakers. One is because the turbo lag, the way the turbo would kick in was unpredictable. So these like dudes would get these cars, you know, like a banker. Not that bankers are bad or anything, but just, you know, they are horrible people. Just kidding. Don't use that. But these dudes who would, you know, not necessarily be familiar with like the power of a 930 turbo would get these cars, and the tail, you know, would whip out when the turbo kicked in, and they would lose control, crash in the cars, thereby making their wives widows. Another reason I heard it's called the Widowmaker is because in the 80s, so normally this is the intercooler. That wouldn't normally be here. So in a regular Porsche, this isn't here, and in a typical turbo, it's about this big.
That's it?
Yeah.
My God.
And then so if you look at the rotary style engine of a Porsche, this area here, you know, in the 80s, a lot of guys wore ties to the office. So they'd be like, oh, what's wrong with the engine? And lean in here, and their tie would get caught in the rotary. And, you know, another way to make someone's wife a widow, I guess. Pretty gory, but, you know, that is the lore. That is the lore of the Porsche.
Has that ever actually been verified? I mean, I'm sure like that's probably
I have
happened.
no idea. That's just what I heard. I have not verified that. So I encourage you to do some sort of due diligence. But I'm sure at least one dude died that way. Seems plausible.
Yeah, Lord knows I definitely almost gotten like hoodie string stuck in.
Yeah,
in
it seems like a very
accessory
shitty way to
belt.
die. And if someone did die that way, hopefully they were an asshole. That's all we could. That's
Karma.
all. Yeah, hopefully it was karma getting revenge on them. I used to have some old Brazilian Volkswagens. I have now moved those on to new stewards. The Jaguar is now moved on. I do have one other car that is in the process of being restored now, which is the 1970 Cadillac DeVille, which is a total departure from, anything I typically am into or do. I've never owned an American car before. It's actually my first American car, American Steel. I just fucking love the look of this, specifically the 1969 and 1970 Cadillac DeVille convertibles. But like once I started learning about them, I realized I needed the 1970 because of the way the taillights are, set up and the way it's silly stuff. I used to say like I would never buy a car that's older than me, and I'm from 1974, so my oldest cars were from 1974. But I've now broken that rule because, seems like a stupid rule to have for no reason. This is a car that it's wet. We just drove through the rain, but this is our first long wheelbase version of a Range Rover Classic. The long wheelbase is also rare. It actually has an 8-inch longer rear door. So the passenger compartment, the rear passenger compartment has a huge,
wow.
a lot of legroom for the Queen.
Yeah.
This car is rare, especially rare because it's like 1995, which is the last year of production. It's a long wheelbase. They only did long wheelbases 93, 94, 95. And this is a 1 of 250 25th anniversary edition. There's a little plaque on here. So we tried to keep it in its original style-ish. So we did, they came in this particular paint color, which we repainted. Normally,
What's it called?
Yes. It's like a silvery gold. I do not know the actual name of it. Yeah. It's the 25th anniversary edition color. We put a bigger suspension on it. These are the original wheels, but we powder coated them black just to give it a little bit more of an edge than the car would have looked. There's something about, look, we've done cars for people where they wanted an exact, like, I want it to look like it's an exact 1995 whatever Range Rover, and we will do that. And we have done that. But for the most part, it is more fun, at least for me, to put our stank on it or, do something to it.
Your flavor.
Our flavor, exactly, to make it, a stray dog. And in general, the whole stray dog thing, the cars here are slightly representative of it, but it's like sort of the forgotten cars. Obviously, a Porsche is in a league of its own, but, Range Rover Classics didn't become a thing until recently. I don't think they started increasing in value until the last, let's say, 5 years or so, So, obviously the Defenders were having a moment and still are having a moment. But, something like this was just, something that people didn't necessarily think of, or they were sort of associating it with the US versions, which had the issues. P.S. This is a US version, which has power seats, all fixed, has a 4.2 liter V8, works well, engine out, rebuild, reseal. It's a great truck. I'm actually considering taking it on a 5-hour road trip to prove how reliable it is. And if I break down, I will never tell anybody, ever.
What was the genesis, do you think? I guess in your opinion, what was the genesis of why the prices kind of started to shoot up like crazy on these and on the Defenders?
Well, the Defenders, were in the U.S. for such a short time period. I think it was like 94 to 97. Like that was the only time they were in the U.S.
Oh, so scarcity.
Scarcity. And the V8s, and then the same issues like rust and all these things, whereas Europe had them. Europe, I believe Defenders were made until 2014 in that current configuration.
That boxy look?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, so up until then, so every, you could bring a car into the US legally after 25 years. So, suddenly the 1990 whatevers, and then so every year there's more available. In fact, You know, what year is it? It's 1990. It's 2023. So the 98s would be like the newest versions that you can get. I think 1998 is when they switched to the TD5 diesel. So like the 98s, like if you went to Spain or, you know, Italy or wherever right now and bought a 1998 Defender would be the most expensive Defender you could buy. A 2005 Defender you could buy for way less money because it's not going to be you know, saleable for 7 more years to the U.S. market.
Right.
A smart man, I used to think a smart man would go and buy all of the 2005s or 2004s now and stick them in a warehouse and sort of, you know, hedge. Although I recently spoke to a guy who did something like that and seems to be losing his shirt because you can't really, you know, you never know. You can't really predict the market. If you could, I guess we'd all be very rich people. But yeah, so you could try to play games like that. The question, in terms of why these started to become valuable, I think again it goes back to nostalgia, and it goes back to, in my opinion, the best versions of these cars actually come from the 90s because that's when they were finally around for 20 years and they were making them the best way they could. And then you have that 25-year rule to bring them in from out of the country. So the U.S. versions were, you know, roached, junked. Whereas suddenly you see like, oh, in Europe, there's someone actually driving a 25-year-old Range Rover around as their car. And they're doing it not because they're trying to be cool. Like the classic car culture there, I've noticed, is very different or, you know, almost non-existent there, or definitely not like what you see here.
Yeah, it's more ubiquitous over there.
Exactly. It's like people are just like, I need this car works, so I'm going to keep driving it, which I think is probably the right way to think about things. Like if you told people you can only buy a new car every 10 or 20 years, I think our environment would be in a much better situation. Not that anyone's doing that, but like if you have a car that just works, that you take care of, that is what these cars are. There's a simplicity to it. I sold one of these recently to a guy who is he's an engineer, but he works in new car development. He's a new car development engineer, and he started doing all these things to the engine. And I was like, are you doing that yourself? And he's like, yes, it's actually the easiest engine I've ever worked on before. You know what I mean? And I'm not a mechanic, but I'm like always impressed by people who can do that.
Can we actually look at it?
Yeah. It's not very, I didn't clean it.
That's fine. I'm kind of more so just like curious as to what it looks like under the hood.
Yeah. I mean, it looks kind of like a modern engine, you know? So like the older V8, older diesel engines that came in these cars were something called a VM diesel. Can you see it or no?
No.
Hang on, let me.
That's fine.
Okay. It's probably best to not show a dirty engine.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was like, my car was in the thing the day before it was part of the Greenwich Concours d'Elegance, and I didn't realize it was a judged event. Like I had the car cleaned, but I didn't like clean the engine, and like they wanted to see the engine. I was like so embarrassed. I was like, oh my god. I'm like, I felt like I was wearing my underwear, at school or something. But yeah, and then the reason this space even exists is in order to, be a legal retail car dealer in New York State, you need to have a physical address that could hold at least 3 vehicles. I happen to live up the street. We got this place during COVID. It was like an old theater that was just a drywall shithole box. And clearly at some point in its life, it had been a garage. They had a storefront here, but clearly there's a garage opening. There's no basement, so it could support the weight of the cars. When we ripped the drywall off, we noticed there was an old payphone mount on the wall, so we bought a payphone and stuck it back there. Clearly, cool garage vibes, a great place to have a showroom, a great place to put cars. And when I started this, most of my cars were actually pre-sold. People get to choose the color or their interior, so it wouldn't be a situation where there would necessarily be a lot of inventory if the cars were pre-sold. So I started putting other interesting cars in here. That's why I got the cars from Brazil. That's why I got the Jaguar. The model is now changing a bit to where we're just making some cars the way we think we should make them, and that way you don't have to wait 6 to 8 months. You can have a car now, hence something like the long wheelbase. And some other cars that we have that will be in here soon.
Excellent. What would you say the space represents for you?
I
Because
mean,
like you're here 40 hours a week, right?
yeah, I'm here 40 hours a week. It represents, in the lamest way, the lamest thing is it's a man cave, and like my wife built this for me, but it actually serves a purpose. It's not just like a place in my house where I like go into my basement and like drink my problems away. It's a legitimate business where we are selling these cars, and the cars just look so great in here. And we purposefully don't have any art on the walls because we think of the cars as the actual art or the sculpture.
Yeah, you want the focus to stay on them.
Exactly. And like the idea is to create a place that's actually like cool to hang out in. I joke with my friends, it's like, this is the coolest secret bar in New York City. I mean, like, you can't come in here, but like when you hang out in here and the lights are dim and the music's on and you're hanging out with some friends, we've had some parties in here. It's different. You're not often in a place with this sort of art or sculpture and vibe, I guess, if you will. And I think this does go with our vibe. It's this vintage, yet, modern, whatever, industrial, I don't know. But I like it in here. And it seems like other people, when they come in, they like it. Or Swaggles constantly asks if she can live in here.
Of course she does.
Yeah. I actually meant, when we were redoing the bathroom, I was like, we should put a shower in here. And then my wife talked me out of it. I guess she was afraid that I might live here.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Now I just wash myself in the toilet, so that's
Wow.
fine.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space. I love the fact that you have that skylight.
That's another thing. That skylight, when we first moved in here, that skylight was completely covered with drywall. Not only on the inside, but on the outside. So when we were pulling the drywall down, we're like, what is this? And we're like, oh my God, there's a 6-foot by 10-foot opening here that clearly was a skylight and boarded over from the top. So we had to bring that back. We had the skylight remade and installed. And obviously it's, it is like the centerpiece of this thing. And again, we signed the lease not even knowing that there was a skylight here. It would have been totally cool without the skylight, but it did have a skylight, which is cool. We're happy
That's a
with the
nice
skylight.
cherry on top.
Yeah.
I mean, just like the way that it's highlighting all the cars right there in the middle. It's
No,
so
it's like
pretty.
ridiculous. Yeah, it's like very.
It's meant to be.
It is most fortuitous. Yes. Yeah.
So what's next up for StrayDog and for you?
I'm doing more trucks that I'm just building the way I want to build them versus working with clients, letting them choose their colors. It's an easier and faster process, and it seems like many of my clients who I am building, bespoke cars for are really wanting things very similar to things I've done in the past anyway. So I did start just making some cars the way I want to make them, and people are buying those cars. So I'm sort of proving that, maybe it's a little bit of everything. There'll be the bespoke part of it. You can wait 6 to 8 months. There'll be like, this car is available now. You could drive it out of here tomorrow. So there's some combination. I have not fully figured it out. I don't know if I'll ever fully figure it out. And I think businesses are sort of constantly evolving. So, in an ideal world, I think I'd have like a whole bunch of trucks that are like mechanically sorted, stripped, and just, ready to be painted and have the interiors done in any color you want and do it in like 3 months. But, that has its challenges too.
Yeah. Would you ever build another one for yourself to like rally or something and go off-roading in?
That's a good question.
'Cause I imagine you probably don't want that to get super duper dirty, even though it can, I'm sure.
I've driven that one on the beach, and I've driven it off-road a little bit in very, low risk terrain, just because it was fun to do, because it's fully capable of doing all that. I just don't want to scratch it up or hurt it. And also, it's not really where my passion is. Like, I'm just not like a huge off-road guy. I live in New York City. I love, the roads here are shitty, and like these cars actually can handle it. The Porsche is a fucking rough ride in New York City, whereas the Range Rover, no problem. And also like that vantage point, like I could see, like even when I'm driving on the BQE, I'm like 3 moves ahead because I could see things happening. And even just, everyone basically drives an SUV these days, but this car sits a little higher, and just like it's almost like an aquarium in terms of the glass to pillar ratio, so you really have an amazing viewpoint, and your seating position is such that you just have a different vantage point. and I'm into that. That's really, and like, I think also like my passion really lies with the, aesthetics of it versus the, I'm not a race car driver. I have a Porsche. Like, I don't need to drive 900 miles an hour. A wise man once said to me, "I'd rather drive a slow car fast." This happens to be a fast car. It's a little frightening, but yeah, I'm not a racer. I'm not a huge off-roader, but I love cars. I love the way they look. I love the way they sound. I love driving them, and it's fun to push them occasionally. But it's just not like my whole thing. Like that Mercedes is sort of like the perfect example. It's not a sports car. It's like a cruiser. You know what I mean? And then maybe that's also just because I'm getting older. I'm just like, I just want to fucking cruise. That's why I bought my 70 Cadillac. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, and that 70 Cadillac has I think it's a 472 V8. I mean, I think it was also the fastest production car at some point, in 1970. A 20-foot long Cadillac, you know what I mean? Like, that thing hauls ass. It uses like, it gets like 1 mile to the gallon probably, but, just utter waste, but just cool to see something like that or have it, yeah.
I get it. It's an experience.
Yeah.
I guess the very last question, I think many car people can, relate to it. Why do you put yourself through all this torture of like such a sacrifice of, having this be the business and like walking away from a lucrative and successful business importing eyewear, and then you got into this, like what draws you to like come in here and do this every single day?
It's purely passion, and also I think just, when I started the Instagram account for this, just seeing the amount of people who followed me because they were just like into seeing the cars, versus like how many people are excited about looking at eyewear, or following an eyewear company. And I'm not as passionate about eyewear, quite frankly. I've always been passionate about cars, and now that I've made it my livelihood, it's much easier for me to get excited about it and really put my entire self into something. You know what I mean? Like, I'm having fun, although it is oftentimes stressful. I do ultimately feel lucky that I'm able to, sort of follow my dream or passion as my career.
Yeah. Which I feel like can be a very risky endeavor, because a lot of people, I even talked to a mechanic today, who was it? It actually wasn't even at all someone I met. It was a video I watched of someone, and the guy was talking about, he built out this like E92 M3 that was a twin turbo. Turbos were in the rear.
Yeah.
Very unique build, like one of one. And he made a good point. He was saying that I'm actually very happy what I do for work, which is laying kitchen tile and like countertops. He's like, if I had to come home every day after doing a 10-hour shift of wrenching on cars, I wouldn't want to go into my own garage.
It's true.
Right?
It's like, what do they say? Like, the shoemaker's kid has holes in his shoes, right?
Yeah.
Because of that reason, or the dentist kid has cavities.
Yeah.
There's definitely something to that. However, I'm not a mechanic. Like, I get to do the parts that I like, on the cars, or the parts that I find interesting.
You're like curating the builds more so than actually getting your hands dirty and like having to get stuck with all the little problems that arise.
Correct. I definitely deal with the problems, but I'm not the one ultimately, certain things I can deal with, but like, yes, like a mechanic will get in there. We have great mechanics who can diagnose and fix those things. I was going to make some other point. Just another thing, like, Wayne Gretzky would always say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like, we got one journey around this thing called life. And fuck it, like sometimes you just have to, things sort of work in a way, and you have to just sort of pursue it. I was careful how I started this. I didn't even mean to start it. I started with one car, and like people kept asking to buy it from me. And then I helped someone get one. And then in COVID, I was like, you know what, let's make a few more and see what happens. And, again, the thought process being, if I'm wrong about this, I could always sell the cars at least for what I have in them. And like, whoops, I guess, no harm, no foul. Like, it's not a business if you're not making a profit, but at least I created a thing. And actually, like, I was also curious to see all the cars in all these different colors. And it's cool to actually just do it. I think I showed you this, but like we actually, when I first started doing this, we started making a Matchbox or a Hot Wheels version of all of our cars too. So these are the first, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me turn this fan off. But these are, oh, there's the Mercedes. There's the Porsche.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Is that number one?
Number one is actually here.
Oops. That's awesome.
Yeah, so we've done way more than this at this point, but these are all cars that we've done and delivered to customers. I stopped making the miniatures just because I've run out of room, and I think I made the point. But
That's super cool. I didn't realize that these were actually customer cars.
Yeah, every one of them.
Miniaturized.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And like even like little details, like this one came with, we did the rainbow stripes on the rack on top of it.
Damn.
You know, this one had these little hella lights or whatever they're called.
The rally lights.
Rally lights, yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And so yeah, this is my my old man cave.
Not bad.
Yeah.
All right, well, are you down to wrap it up here?
I'm good, man. I think we did it.
Yeah.
StrayDog out.
Tom Grelick out too.